welcome to the Graduate X Masker Career Fair 2022. My name is Jeremy Au, the Graduate X Masker Ambassador from the Masker Victorian chapter, and I'll be your MC and moderator for today. Have you ever fantasized about what life would be like for you after graduation, or what your future would look like in Malaysia, or how to land a job in this competitive job climate? Well, look no further, as we are very proud to have speakers from a couple of notable Malaysian companies today who will be able to answer all your questions and provide valuable insights into today's job market. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great privilege to welcome our distinguished speakers and panelists, Madam Norlida Oli Azmi, the Group Chief People Officer of Axiata Group Berhad, Mr. Neo Ziming, the Head Customer Value Management and Segments Group Consumer Banking of CIMB Bank, Mr. Sanjeev Selvaraja, the Finance Controller of Intel Technology, Mr. Fang Ching Lin, the Head of Corporate Development of Maxis Communication, and lastly, Mr. Chen Fong Tuan, the Senior Executive Vice President, Group Human Capital of Maybank. The purpose of today's webinar is to bridge the gap between Malaysian employers and talents studying in Australia. With the theme of why would I work in Malaysia, this webinar also aims to expose talents to a lot of insight into the opportunities offered to fresh graduates. Again, welcome to the Graduate X Masker 2022 webinar with the theme of why would I work in Malaysia. So good morning again to the distinguished speakers, and thank you all for joining us today. And I hope that all is well on your side. So please allow me to ask a few questions so that the participants can get the context of this webinar. The first question I'd like to ask is Puan Nolida, and the question is, what are the main perks and benefits of working in a company in your home country?
Thank you for the invitation and for the question. It's actually a very appropriate question given today when people talk about hybrid working, and therefore the question is, what is really the advantage of working in a home country physically? I believe one of the benefits of working in the home country is that generally that's where if you are as a company like Axiata, this is our home base, our corporate center. And therefore, there will be a consolidation of viewpoints and experiences that comes to you from the center of seeing how do all the businesses that we have regionally come together that supports our ambitions. And of course, if you're a Malaysian working in your home country, you carry with you the natural acculturation of cultural values. And therefore, to me, that is a very exciting value proposition to come back. It's almost like plug and play. And when you have the perspective of an international experience, it is almost an elevated experience. I think I'll stop at this stage as that's the opening question. Jeremy, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madam Nolida. Would any other speakers like to answer this question? Maybe Mr. Sanjeev?
Yeah, sure, Jeremy. So on top of what Ali said, right, you are bringing that exposure, right, back to your home country to help develop your home country. That's one of the most important aspects. And number two is you are going to be with your family, right? Family plays a big part in your life. And working in your home country with that exposure, right, it's kind of a win-win situation. And last thing is Malaysia is well renowned for its food, right? So when you come, it's always good to have home food and enjoy what you have enjoyed throughout your childhood and continue that. So those are some of the small perks, right, when you work in your home country.
Thank you, Mr. Sanjeev. Mr. Neo, would you like to answer this question as well?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo Nogida's point on Malaysia being the home base for many regional corporates, right? If we look around the region, I would say that we in Malaysia have equally numerous regional and global organizations, right? And if we compare to our northern neighbor, Thailand, or our southern neighbor, Singapore, even then, we can be very confident that we have an equal, if not more, number of international companies, right? And I think the advantage here is that when you work in Malaysia, at the beating heart of where these international regional companies are based, right? You have every advantage to advance, every advantage to grow beyond borders or even within borders to gain that exposure, right? And the one thing that perhaps an insight that I want to share on why Malaysians are so good at being international, at going abroad, at expanding regionally is because we are used to a multicultural, very diverse social setup, right? This is what we grew up with. This is one of our core strengths that make us who we are, right? So if you come back to Malaysia and work for a world-class, world-beating organization like Axiata, Maybank, CIMB, many more, right? You will further this advantage that you have inbuilt, innate within yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Neil, for that answer. Mr. Chen and Mr. Fang, would you like to answer as well?
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to go next. Good. Thank you very much, Jeremy and the Graduan team. It's actually personally for me, being an alumni of Melbourne Uni, being part of MASCA, this is actually a great honor for me to sort of give back. And I lived at International House when I was in Melbourne, and I asked myself, right, living in there with lots of diversity and doing, what could I actually bring back to Malaysia? And then when I was sort of weighing up all these things and when weighing up your question, then I asked myself, how does that then link to Maxis? Axiata, of course, CIMB, Maybank, regional, whereas Maxis is the other way around, which is we are sort of homegrown, home-based, very proud to have been a local success story. Of course, our major shareholder is a Melbourne Uni alumni himself. But actually, we all have very international minds here. We've got great leaders. A lot of our leaders have international experiences. So we have been able to learn a lot from here. We are a very diverse a group of people. We have over 200 staff who come from over 30 countries and across 5 continents, all here in KL as well. So I think diversity, to Neil's point earlier, first, yes, we grew up innately as a very diverse culture, but we are also a hodgepodge or sort of a hub of many people from all around the world wanting to come to KL. So that's really something that is attractive, I feel, in terms of building your career. And the other thing to reflect on is, we are observing, a global sort of potential economic recession coming, with high inflation and with the war in Ukraine impacting the economy. Now, why is that important? If you actually look across some of the economic stats across the globe, and you realize that Southeast Asia, of all regions, is actually probably the least impacted of all. It shows a couple of things. One is a very resilient part of the world, but also it is the growth engine. I think Southeast Asia and Malaysia being at the center of it is going to be, watch this space, over the next 5 to 10 years, going to be the growth place. So it's the best time and best place really to start your career.
Okay, I guess I'll go last then. So first and foremost, thank you for inviting me and Maybank to the panel. I've been out of Malaysia 3 times in my career. Once in Atlanta, another time in Singapore, and then another time in Jakarta. Well, you can say that nothing beats being home first. The reason being, simple reason, is we're all Malaysians. If Malaysians are not back to help the country, who else will? I've just checked, Ching Lin has been away and been back since the last 4 or 5 years. And he has been away in Melbourne, he has been away in London, and Ollie has been away in Dubai and all over, right? There are reasons why we are back. The main reason is obviously family. Second, more importantly, is the bigger family, which is the Malaysia family. And it's important. And if talent, Malaysian talent, is not back to build the country, then who else will? I mean, you don't expect other people to help build our nation, right? So that's one. Secondly, just to echo what Ching said earlier, is the opportunity and the potential for growth in the region is big. And within the region, there are probably a few countries, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia. The potential is just massive. It's just a matter of picking the right industry, picking the right time, and there is no better time than now. Interestingly, it's a perfect storm. Right after the pandemic, then we almost straight going into a inflationary situation. At the same time, there is potentially a recessionary pressure as well. So you have inflation and recession happening all the same time, rebounding from the pandemic, which is we are still smarting from. At the same time, we have this bipolar geopolitical issue that's happening between China and the United States. And stuck in between, there is Europe, and then there is India. So as if you hear all this, there is one particular region is kind of, I wouldn't say insulated, but seeing from the outside, obviously we get impacted as well, which is Southeast Asia. And Malaysia being a major constituent of the ASEAN community, I don't think there is a better time than to come back. Well, the country needs us for sure. With not only talent that's graduates and so on, but all kinds of talent. And we have to start early as possible. And we see to you that you come back and help us grow this country. So well, I'll stop on that first before getting too existential.
Thank you, Mr. Chen, for your answer. Now we'll move on to the second question, which is, how do you implement professional growth for your employees? And I would like Mr. Neo to answer that question.
Well, I can speak on behalf of CIMB. And perhaps I'll take myself as an example, right? I actually let me start at the beginning. I have a degree in synthetic organic chemistry. And I actually came back to Feng Tuan's point, right? I really wanted to help the nation. So I joined the civil service. And my starting salary was 1,650 ringgit, right? And from there, to cut short the story, I joined CIMB as a management trainee, right? And I think it's important how talent development is institutionalized, right? The opportunity for exposure is institutionalized within any organization. Now, I can say that in CIMB's case, it very much is the case, right? In my personal experience, I've had the opportunity, even though I have an academic background, which is totally unrelated to banking, right? I've had the opportunity of rotating through commercial banking. I was posted to Cambodia as its deputy CEO at the age of 32, right? And coming back, I was given the opportunity of starting my own unit to look into personalized banking. So what I'm trying to say is it is organizational, it is organization specific. The truly good, truly great organizations do this almost instinctively, right? And I believe that CIMB is not the only one here. I believe that the companies or organizations which our panelists represent have their own versions of talent development, right? And there's no one size fits all. There's no right or wrong. But I think the important thing, the key word, the takeaway here is opportunity and exposure, right? And I think if you are part of a corporate headquarters, those opportunities are abundant for you in Malaysia.
Thank you, Mr. Neil, for that. I'd like Madam Nolida as well to answer this question.
It's such an it's such an exciting topic, and you're quite right, Neil. It's like I think all the panelists here comes from organizations where talent development is so paramount to what we are. I think the difference lies in where the interventions differ a little bit to the corporate ambitions that you are in, right? So for us in Axiata, we want to be the next generation digital champions. And sometimes it's easier said than done, but how do we really equip people who've just come out from universities or people who've done previous jobs before? And what I like to say is that, interestingly enough, when you spoke about being an organic chemist or something like that, you know, the world has moved to a skills-based talent management and organization, right? So when we look to build agile and digital sort of capabilities today, we're looking to build it across the organization. I always tell people my aspiration is that when people see an Axiata employee, they just sort of exude this very digital and agile persona. You know, I think this comes a little bit from my early banking days, right? I have two very senior bankers here. It's the relationships and the personal projections. So we really would like to ensure professional growth in ensuring that not just people who are in talent programs, but really a talented workforce. And, you know, some are unique enterprise-wide and some specialists. And I think increasingly, you don't talk about individual development plan, it's really about growth plan. And when you are part of a larger organization or your organizations have partners with other people, that experiential element is so key. And I feel talent development these days incorporates moments of reflection, mentoring, because, you know, they say now is people clouds, not the cloud computing, is that you learn from each other. And I think that's the world that we hopefully the audience who are in the very young space, you value learning from each other. So collective elevation, I think, is going to be very paramount in how we do professional development. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Madam Nolida. Up next, we will have the third question, which is, what types of assurance are you able to give to fresh graduates who are seeking employment in your field or company? Is there a ladder to climb to get to a higher position eventually? And I'd like to direct this question to Mr. Sanjeev and Mr. Chen.
Definitely. You can be the CEO if you want to be, right? So you start as a fresh grad and you can go through the ladder and be the CFO, CEO, or specialized business leader in your field of choice. Because at Intel, right, we produce world-changing technology that impacts everyone and improves everyone's life on Earth, right? And for example, we cannot travel to Australia this year around. Let's hop onto Zoom. Yeah, no worries. We will power it through Intel, right? Okay, you got the laptop, and I'm pretty sure that you have a sticker on it, Intel inside. Yeah, we can do that. Oh, by the way, to do that, we need hundreds of thousands of people, right? And we need multidisciplinary folks, right? It's not only engineers. We need people who are articulating the value proposition to our cloud providers, articulating the value proposition to financial services, right? Like Maybank, CIMB, our big users at the back end of cloud technology as well in Malaysia, right? So, and if you're in finance like me, right, you are critical in driving the strategy, in driving the spending discipline, so that you can continue to invest for the future. So to do all this, right, we need people, and we need people at all levels. So for me personally, right, I started in Malaysia. By the way, I'm not a Malaysian. I'm sneaking in as a Malaysian today. I'm from Australia, by the way. So I started as a person, right, looking at the strategy for Malaysia. And then I changed my job roles, looking after something in the manufacturing side, something in the finance, all the time, moving up the ladder, right? And I'm just looking after the finance affairs of Malaysia right now. And that doesn't stop there, because there is always the bigger picture of what else you can do. So you have to remember, it's an equation, right? It's your willingness of what you want to do, right, versus what the company that you are working for can offer you as well. So it's all about you showing that potential, you showing that initiative to climb the ladder. And the ladder, I'm pretty sure in most of the corporate companies or any other companies, right, is there. It's how willing and how much effort that you are willing to put in there to climb that ladder. So yes, there's no such thing as, hey, you start fresh graduate now, in 10 years time, you are going to be a manager or a director. It's not that, right? Throughout the career, you got to make sure that you are continuously learning and developing to grasp the opportunities that come your way. And if you do that, the answer is very simple, yes, there is a ladder that you can always climb.
Okay, I guess it's mine right now. Firstly, I would like to address, because it's kind of interconnected anyway, the previous question, which is talent development. I think in the future, development is already a necessity, right? It is a given. The question is, how do we accelerate? How do we catalyze growth? In Maybank, obviously, all of us know that our mission is humanizing financial services, and being humanizing is to provide choice. And this is primarily, we think about, it must be choice for customers. No, it is also choice for our employees. Means you challenge yourself. You make your own choice about your career, whether it's going to be a ladder, or it's going to be a cloud, or there is no ladder at all. Because if you look at ladder, it's always about roles. This role, next role, next role, next role, next role, at the end, CEO. But as what Ollie said earlier, it is about skills. And skills does not necessarily mean roles, does not necessarily mean growth in terms of a specific job. It can be you are expanding your skill sets, therefore preparing yourself for a bigger role in the future. So it can be lateral. You're not even climbing the ladder. You are just moving across laterally. So instead of a very vertical mindset, now the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, means you are just getting deeper into one thing, making us lose the opportunity to learn across. There's a book that says, generalist is going to be the emperor of the world. Previously, it's not specialists. Specialists are the niche, and specialists are going to rule the world. But going forward, because of the advent of technology, because of the pervasiveness of knowledge, the ability to manage context, the ability to synthesize information, the ability to communicate and collaborate through different clusters of experiences and different clusters and segment of people becomes key. Yeah. So if you ask me, what assurances that any of us can give towards our success, none of us can give any assurances, because that assurance can come only from you. We can't guarantee that you're going to be successful. I'm sorry. If you think that you come back and like, what guarantee can you give me if I join Maxis? If you join Maybank, CIMB, Axiata, Intel, none of us can say. Even Nolida as a head in Axiata said, well, I can help you. I can facilitate a process for you, but at the end, it's going to be you. How willing, how hungry, and how ready are you to learn, right? So we can have all the best development programs for you. Those are just what I call push. It's push to you, right? So it is the pull that's more important. What do you need? What do you want? How do you want it? When do you need it? That's when we provide the platform, at least Maybank does, a platform to ensure that you get the right development at the right time, so that when you're ready to take on a bigger role, you are equipped. I think that's the key here. I'm sure I'm paraphrasing for all of us, but that is at least our belief. It is our philosophy of development in Maybank. And humanizing is not just for customers. Humanizing has to start for us from within. So it is with our employees first.
Thank you, Mr. Chen, for your answer. Now we'll be moving on to our next question, which is, how would you describe the nature of business in Malaysia, and how would that be an advantage for the overseas graduates? And I'd like to direct this question to Mr. Fang and Mr. Neo, knowing that both of you both graduated from a overseas university, such as University of Melbourne and University of Bristol, respectively.
Okay. I will approach this. So your question is, how do you describe the nature of the businesses, right?
Yep.
And I think, I mean, clearly, I'm not going to go down the industry path or talk specific about Maxis here, but I think there are a few themes, right, in terms of, you know, the 5 companies here, and then especially the larger corporates in Malaysia face or are starting to observe. And of course, if I do miss out, please, fellow panelists, feel free to chip in. But I think one is we are competitive, very competitive. In fact, you know, I mean, especially in the markets, in the banking sector, in the telco sector, and what that means is that actually drives a lot of innovation, and there's a lot of drive there to be number one. I mean, Maxis, of course, our tagline, we say we want to always be ahead, and that's something we also sort of ingrain as a culture to our fellow staff. But so competition is one that I've observed. Linked to that is 2, talent scarcity, and therefore the willingness to invest actually amongst at least the larger corporates. So Nolida may or may not know, her team is also, of course, knocking on the doors of some of my team members to try and bring them across. And then similarly, of course, to be fair, we look to some of the banks to bring some of the talents to come across to work in the corporates, right? But what you are starting to realize is that especially real raw talent is scarce. And now you can see it as, Ching, this is glass half empty. That means it's not good for the country. Or you see it as glass half full, which is the corporate ladder, you know, as the previous question was addressing, could actually be faster for me to rise. So to me, that talent scarcity point is something I think it's observed all across the board, and you know, it's as a sort of Australian graduate, I see, you know, you do have the upper hand, having twofold, right? One, in international education, but also 2, having lived overseas and observed even this sort of 3 to 4 years of your life, to observe ways of life and how people live, to really bring back and contribute back to Malaysia. And I think a third one is, as much as, you know, we are say come back to Malaysia, we are actually a very international country, very diverse and very international country. So, and what I mean by that is actually a few things. One, we bring in talent from all around the world, which I mentioned even at Maxis, but I'm sure the rest of my fellow panelists will share similar stats of you know, international people, so you can learn from them. But also we do have, you know, for the likes of course, the banks and Axiata, you know, companies in other parts of the world. But specifically to Maxis, we are part of many international alliances, for example, the Bridge Alliance, which, you know, we have, we pick up the phone, we speak to Vodafone, we pick up the phone, we speak to Singtel, and we learn a lot actually, just so you get the best of both worlds, right? One, being home, but 2, also still learning from the best and being very international. So sort of these 3 things, very competitive, talent scarce, but very willing to invest. And actually that willingness to invest, FT mentioned earlier, right? Giving the platform, investing, giving executive online, and also sort of, you know, MBA support, etc. depending, of course, on the different companies. But there's a lot of willingness to invest. And then the last one is actually we're very international.
Yeah. Just, I've had some time to consider this question, and I think I'd like to continue on the diversity theme, right? If you look at the spectrum of industries that are available as an option set for you to pick from in Malaysia, right? We are truly, truly fortunate to have representation in almost every major industry. Some examples, right? Banking, CIMB, Maybank, two of the 5 largest banks in the region, right? Healthcare, IHH. Yes, I know that they are listed in Singapore, but their major shareholders are Malaysian, right? They are the largest integrated healthcare group in the region. Telco, Axiata. Plantations, agriculture, we have IOI, KLK, Sime Darby, world beaters in this industry. Manufacturing, right? I'm from Penang. I grew up next to the manufacturing hubs. I know that Intel hires 6,000 people, 1,500 of them are engineers, and it is one of the 3 global innovation hubs in their global lineup, right? We design chips in Penang. So, if you look at the breadth of the options that are available to you, and the depth of the quality that we have in each of these industries, as evidenced by the companies I mentioned earlier, all regional champions in their own respect, right? Again, coming back to the point I made earlier, opportunities, exposure, abundant, and truly diverse.
All right, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Neo, for your answer. So we're moving on to the next question, which is, should salary be the motivating factor when starting a career? And I'd like to direct this question to Madam Nolida, Mr. Sanjeev, and also Mr. Chen to answer.
I believe we don't live on love and sunshine alone. So I do believe money should be one of the motivating factors. And in Malaysia, sometimes, and this is a reality because we're talking to graduates who are overseas, right? And in such a more transparent world, we know what the earning capacities are at the various countries. So I think my fellow colleagues here have spoken about the value of coming back. So I do believe that it should be a consideration. And I hope that we as employers on this side of the table are making efforts to elevate, to move above that wage suppression that I think people who've been overseas feel there is, right? And I think we're trying to do as much as we can, depending on companies' affordability. I believe it should be one of the considerations, Jeremy. However, I do feel that we should make other factors. And increasingly in my conversations and interviews, whilst money is important, they always ask me, Ollie, what's the culture at Axiata? What is the Axiata's philosophy on diversity, equity, and inclusion? Are you a responsible corporate citizen in your stewardship in terms of sustainability? So the narrative has changed, Jeremy. So I feel I'm sorry, I may be touching other questions, but I couldn't answer that without saying that I think it is important because not all of us come from a privileged environment where we are pursuing and supporting our other families. So there is an economic considerations. And I think this comes more to when you have options. When you have options, choose the one that makes total sense and not just the highest pay. To me, that's when it no longer becomes money is the motivating factor.
Thank you, Madam Nolida, for that. Mr. Sanjeev, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So it's a factor, right? Not the factor. That's how I would answer that question. And from my personal experience, I will share what are the other factors that motivated me, right, since graduation. Because at the time of graduation, I was working in a fast food chain as a store manager, pretty decent money, and you get bonuses and all that kind of stuff. But when I was graduating, the pay that got offered was pretty much half of what I was earning at that time, right? So it was puzzling for a lot of folks at that time. Hey, why would you leave this job to go to the other job? But the deciding factors were your career growth, right? Because you are studying for to specialize in a certain area when you are graduating, right? So I wanted to be an accountant at that point in time, and going to a public accounting firm would help me to do my papers, be a CA, and at the same time move around those accounting firms, finance firms, consulting firms, etc., to develop my skills, right? So then the second time I moved, a major move, right, from Australia to Malaysia at that time, because when I finished my MBA, the next factor was, how do I get international experience, right? It wasn't like in Australia, there wasn't any companies or not. But if you look at that landscape, it's all about like locally grown companies who dominate that market, big companies, but they lacked that international exposure like some of the other companies like Intel, right? So when I moved, it was, again, if you compare the exchange rates and all that, it was kind of a pay cut as well, right? So, but what that enabled me is grow my skill sets, not only in the finance and accounting field where I studied, but across multi-discipline, right? I did a lot of rotations around different disciplines, right? And that prepares me for the next leap. But in the meantime, I'm getting like exposure in different countries, different cultures. So you become an internationally experienced person, right? So those are some of the factors that motivated me when I went through my career up to this point. And as you can see, money is, yes, it's needed, but it wasn't the motivating factor. It was a factor, but there were other things that trumped money in my case.
Okay, let me start with this. You probably get some advice saying that never ask how much money you're gonna get in any interviews. I said that's a myth. You should ask it every time. If they don't ask you, then you should ask it because it's on your mind anyway. So it is important. It is important. There is no two ways about it. Regardless of what we say here, everything is important. You know, it's not the factor. But at the end, it is a factor. And for graduates, it can be the factor as well because there's nothing else. You have no idea what culture is. At the end, it's your first job, right? Interestingly, I'll give you an anecdote to this. I do not want to name specific organization, but it's anecdotal. There is a company in Malaysia that pays crazy money for fresh graduate. Crazy money. That kind of money is 5-figure money for zero experience. And you think that, wow, you know, this is the job for me because I ain't gonna get that kind of money if I join any companies. None of us here can compete against them, not even Maxis. I know Maxis pay crazy money too, but not even Maxis can do that. Because they say once you join Maxis, you can't leave, right? Because it's like Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave. But this company is just madness. But recently, they just had big announcement that they were going to furlough a lot of people. They are going to let go a lot of people, starting from a couple of neighboring countries and so on. You guys find out which company that is. I say Ching is nodding, so I presume he knows what I'm saying and who am I referring to. That's when organizations think that money is everything, that you put money as a dangling carrot in front of young graduates, they will just, jump at it. Then the other factor becomes a lot more apparent when I can pay you this money, but I can let you go anytime I want, anytime I need to. Because why? Because you cost a lot without bringing a lot of experience, without bringing a lot of value and content yet. So that's why you need some time to learn and bring experience so that you can actually earn that kind of value. Because value is commensurating. You do not, get something out of nothing, right? So I know I probably would be the most unpopular one here, saying, that guys, forget about big money first. Focus on big experience. Focus on getting the skills, because the money will come. It will come because it's hygiene anyway. And when all of us, I recognize that we bring value, commensurating value will follow anyway. So the rest of it, like culture and everything else, DI, ESG, they're all important. They're all important. But the question I want to ask you guys who are listening in is, what is your value system? How much or what level do you put each of these factors is? I can't say it for you. I can't tell you don't put money as number one, because if it is for you, it is for you, right? It's just a matter of you need to balance. Everything comes with a price. Even money comes with a price. Neo and I are from banks. Money don't, just come to banks for free. We still got to invest to raise capital so that then we can lend it out. So money costs money too. So think about it. Balance is the most important. Optimal balance is even more important. What is critical to you that will make you successful? My suggestion, because that's how I built my career, is do not worry about the money, because it will come, but don't shortchange yourself. So do ask. If you think that this is what you think you should get, that this is what you want, and you'll be satisfied, contented, and you can deliver, then ask for it. Then it depends on whether there is a agreement at the end, whether that is the number or the value that we agree on. But don't shortchange yourself. Neither do you overestimate your value. So that would be my parting words for now on this topic.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chen, Mr. Sanjeev, and Madam Nolida for your very interesting answers. Now we'll move on to the next question. As an employer, how do you satisfy talent's non-monetary fulfillment? And I'd like to direct this question to Mr. Fang, Madam Nolida, and Mr. Neo to answer.
Should I go ladies first, or you want me to go? Oh, okay. All right. I mean, can I just reflect? I mean, it's kind of linked actually in terms of the motivating factor in the previous question today. So I thought I'll just quickly segue. I don't want to belabor the fact that yes, money is a motivating factor, but I always segment as part of my career. If I reflect, one, it's a long marathon. It goes for about 30-40 years, depending on, if you want to go into corporate. Of course, if you have different paths in your life, that's different. But specifically for corporates, so 30 to 40 years. And then you ask yourself, in my 20s, in my 30s, and in my 40s, right? I always segment that in sort of 10 years. What is it that I want to achieve? And then and money is important to make sure there is enough to sort of live, etc. But in your 20s, I always feel like it's all about learning. Whether it's learning about culture, whether it's learning about technical skills, it's all about learning however you define learning. And then in your 30s, it's all about refining those skills. So, refining whatever you've learned, and then making sure, you test those skills across the different skill sets. So in Neo's example earlier, he went to Cambodia to build something, and then he, as a deputy head, and then he sort of moved back to grow his own to really refine those management and sort of leadership and banking, sort of consumer banking skill sets that he's learned and sort of refine in his 30s. And then in the 40s onwards, you sort of I call it like you kill it, right? That's when you sort of, okay, say, bang, I've done 20 years of sort of learning and refining, and then bang, bang, bang. You then start to say this, and then to Mr. Chan's point, like, what value do you bring? If you've invested sort of 15 to 20 years of your life learning and refining, then you will be able to demand a lot more. And then that's when things get, you can say it's arbitrary or whatever, but then value is in the eye of the beholder. And then that's when you can really demand a lot more, right? And so then if I link back to this question, right, what, how do we satisfy non-monetary fulfillment at the graduate level? Then it's back to the things that we've all mentioned earlier, and everything that allows you and really facilitates you to learn. So of course, there's the usual, we will, at least from Maxis, but I'm sure this applies to everyone. You've got a professional degree that's sort of in line with what you need to do to achieve, like, for example, a chartered accountancy or CFA. That's something we support. Of course, we have what we call our young talent programs, where we invest time in them in terms of training, soft skills, presentation skills. Again, this is, I'm speaking it from Maxis, but really, I don't. This is not special. I don't think this sort of across the board. Everyone has that. How to present, how to communicate, how to learn how to do professional writing. I think that's really important as well. We do have rotation programs just to ensure you get to sort of even learn and refine your skills even in your 20s if you can. So someone in HR could come to finance with the right roles, etc. So you do get rotation programs within a division, sometimes across divisions. And at Maxis, maybe not in your first 5 years of your career, but if you do stay on, we of course have sister companies like Astro and Bumi Armada. So again, you go very different. You get Miasat sort of. So we have many different sister companies that we now, for example, there may be a big move. A senior member from Maxis will be moving to one of the sister companies, and that's really part of this wider rotation program. Of course, within the banks, Neo has had a very good example of rotation there already himself. But those are things that we invest in. And then, of course, lastly, is on the job training. So we have leaders in the region, leaders with a lot of international experience that I think new graduates can really learn from. Your 20s is seriously just making sure you go in there and learn from the best and soak up like a sponge. So I think those three things: sister companies and the usual training, and then on the job, just learning from the best. That's what I'll say.
Ollie, you want to go, or does the best come at last?
No, the best is last, so therefore that's you, Neil. So I think we'll go telco for telco. No, it's just because it's like these days, like what Fong Tan was saying. With the talent space so tight, I find actually my greatest competitors are the banks, actually. Because the disintermediation that the industry brings to the various industries is very real. But coming back to the topic, I think it's very great that all of us here have programs that fulfill young talents' aspirations. And I think that to me is very important because we collectively move the capability of the country. All right. So I'm very proud to be on this panel where I know all of you have tremendously good programs. And I think all that Fang has highlighted, we have. But it's like, it's also very interesting because ultimately it's what Fong Tuan had mentioned earlier. How much do you want? Is that fulfillment enough? I am not the best paymaster in the industry. I'm not. And I know who the crazy monies are. And ultimately, what the aspiring graduate or the person who's coming to us has to ask on balance is what we are offering good enough for you. The learnings and the experiences that Fang has mentioned is very key for some of the people. And I like the way how you have stratified the experiences by the 20s. You take more risk and maybe not so much money. But as you have family and increasing responsibilities, you want a little bit more. And I think some of the organizations here that have multiple locations, we really need to continue stimulating these people's experiences, right? And the thing is, you can talk about I have mobility, but not all of Malaysians love to move about. The reality is, how much do you want to move about? Can you give up your nasi lemak every morning and not? It doesn't taste the same anywhere else in the world, you know, and that's the reality. So I think we have this non-monetary fulfillment, which comes from, I mean, after the lockdown, right? Everybody talks about well-being. I don't know how many well-being can we give. We talk about training, and then we give Fridays. I have a feel-good Friday, and I have online platform. Do people really take the opportunity to dedicate 1 hour to learn? So for us in the professions that sits on this side, we say, okay, we want on-demand, online, bite-sized learning. We want to give experiential. And I believe all of our organizations give this. So I think, Jeremy, to answer your question, the non-monetary, I think most of the organizations where they can afford it are availing in terms of growth via learning, experiential. I think most organizations are now also not saying you don't have to move jobs. Volunteer for jobs in projects, because we're now going into, you know, this famous word agile, right? Agile at scale, agile in ways of working. So I think these are the non-monetary. And the other thing I was reading, it says having a best friend at work helps productivity and engagement. And as we all come back, I think the value proposition of non-monetary fulfillment is being redefined for all of us. You know, for some of our industries, 5 days all come to work, some 3 days. What are you looking that will fulfill it? I feel that we who sit on this side of the table are still learning in this new evolved world. Which of these really matter? Are we doing too much for everybody? And they're like saying, so what? What I really want, maybe like what Fontian said, I want more money, and then go figure later on. Or maybe it's 50-50. I think we're adjusting. The great news is for all of you graduates out there is I think we have those in our portfolio in the various companies with some clarity. We hope to avail it, and then it is a good engagement on both sides. Back to you, to Neo, the best for last, as you said just now.
Thank you. No pressure. You know, I just want to answer quickly. I think we're also running out of time. The previous question and the current question kind of together because they are linked, right? Is money important? Of course it is, right? It is not the only motivating factor. And if I look back on my peers, my friends, right? We all came through the system together, right? My graduating class from Zhongling High School of 2001, right? I think very often, people make the mistake of being short-sighted, right? People make the mistake of being, I guess, for lack of a better word, seduced by a nice fat package at the start of your career. But to me, what is really much, much more important is the trajectory and the growth and the headroom that you have in any given position that you have. Doesn't matter if you get a starting salary of 4,000, 5,000 Sing dollars, example, right? But if your trajectory is 1 to 2% per annum, and your headroom is limited because opportunities could be limited, right? You can be very sure that someone who has chosen a lower salary with higher opportunity, more headroom to grow, will overtake you eventually, right? And that day actually comes a lot faster than you think, right? I can tell you that in the first 5 years of my career, right? Salary growth was abysmal, terrible. I started with, as I mentioned just now, right? 1,650 starting salary. But as you grow your capabilities, your knowledge, the fundamentals that you can offer, the value that you can offer, that is also reflected in your compensation, right? Which grows exponentially. And provided, of course, you have the right attitude, you work hard, right? And you do well, okay? Always a caveat to that. The last thing I want to share on this is I think our definition of total compensation is far too narrow. It's not just about salary, allowances, right? No. To me, total compensation really includes the intangibles, right? The intangibles like the nasi lemak that Oli mentioned, right? For me, it's char kway teow, right? Or kerang bak kut teh. Nowhere you can get this, right? Other than Malaysia, right? For me, the intangibles that fit into the total compensation is the ability to hop in my car on a Sunday morning, go for a drive, go up to Genting with my friends, right? And have steamboat there. It's not something you can do in many, many neighboring countries. We take for granted these intangibles, right? These avenues that we have that are open to us by just being part of the country that we belong to, right? So when you think about compensation, think about total compensation, and think about broadening your definition of total compensation, right? And finally, on how do you satisfy talent's non-monetary fulfillment? I think again comes back to trajectory I mentioned just now, exposure, opportunity, right? At CIMB, we have that organized and made available to our staff at every level of their career path, right? And I can say that because I'm testament to that program, right? When you join in your 20s, you're part of a management trainee program. We send you all over the place, right? In your 30s, you're part of an aspiring leadership program. In your 40s, you're part of an executive leadership program. And the instruction, the training, the intangibles, even like coaching, mentorship, friendships that you build in each of these stages in your career, right? That is enabled in a company like CIMB, of course, but in many other companies, such as the companies that our panelists represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neo, and all the speakers for answering the question. We'll move on now to our final question from the info kit. So I would like all speakers to answer this question. And the question is, would you like to share some tips for graduates starting out their careers? Maybe I'll get Mr. Sanjeev to go first.
Sure. So probably I'll just keep it to one advice. Love your job, but not your employer, right? Let me expand. You need to be really, really loving your job. Why? Is that if you look at the historical studies, the people who have performed really well throughout their studies, throughout their uni, they don't really translate into the top performance in what they do at their job. So what is the missing X factor? It's the heart, right? Your heart should be in the job that you do. So when your heart and your mind are in sync, you'll really do well in your career or whatever that you choose to do, your own business, whatever not. You may not land that job on your first go. If you are really lucky, you would do that, right? But if you get to a job where you love it and you have the brains to do it, you will go really, really far. And that would be the best case scenario. And the second part of that is not your employer, right? Why? Is that when you are in a career, right, you don't want to build biases, right? In your brain where you'd say, hey, my company says this, so it should be right. That's kind of, you are telling your kids sometimes, hey, I love my kids, so I'm not gonna take a hard hand on them, right? But what you need to bring to the table is your critical view of what we do. When you love your employer, that critical view can get diluted at times. And that's why I said not the employer. Obviously, you are going to like the place that you're working, right? That's why you are there in the first place. But don't go overboard and buy in everything that the management does or everyone around does that, right? We have seen corporate examples of companies going bad. Why? Because no one stood up and said, hey, that is not the right thing to do. So love your job, but not all the time your employer.
Should I go? Okay. Well, I agree, to a certain extent, because obviously I love my employer because I rejoined the bank after I left 6 years ago. So obviously I love Maybank quite a bit because I've been around. I went out almost like sabbatical, went for a 6-year sabbatical and decided, well, I need to go home because Maybank is home and it feels home. Just very quickly, not tip, yeah. Just to expand a little bit before I forget, is there is another reason for Malaysians to come back and join Malaysian companies. And this I can say so because I've been to many. I've been to GLCs, I've been to MNCs, I've been to banks, different industries. That's the difference. When you join a Malaysian company, big corporate Malaysian, large corporates, the apex of power, decision making, is in Malaysia. You will be just maybe 4 levels, 5 levels away, or maybe 7, whatever number that is, but closer to the apex of power, CEO, the board, than you'll ever be if you're with a multinational, because you can't even see the clouds, the palaces, if you're in a multinational. So just quick segue. Although, no disrespecting Intel, obviously, Intel is big, number 3, big, but Maxis, you'll be very close to CEO, or you'll be sitting right beside Ching in the office, etc., etc. You'll be with Dato Rahman, maybe just over coffee. You'll be seeing Nolida, on while you're parking your car. You certainly will see me if you're parking the car in Maybank, Menara Maybank. For sure, and you'll be seeing Dato' Karusale while he's walking to his teh tarik in the afternoon. So that's the difference, and that itself, to me, it's a significant value proposition for Malaysians and for you guys to come back to Malaysia. Now, the tip, I've already said the tip, so my tip is learn as much as you can. I couldn't agree more with saying that he started 1,650. I started with 2,000 ringgit, but I was a scholar, so I didn't have a chance, a choice at all. So whatever they gave me, I had to take anyway. I was a scholar with Tenaga Nasional, so they sent me for studies. I need to come back. Whatever they give me, I had to take. So it's 2,000 ringgit. For the first exactly 5 years of my career, I think I moved less than 60%. And 60% of 2,000 ringgit is not a lot, yeah, by the way. It's just minute. But after you have learned, after you have gotten to a certain level, it just explodes, right? But need to be patient. So learn patience. I know instant gratification is the order of the day right now, but you've got to learn, because nothing beats time to get experience, because blood, sweat, and tears is made us all, we are all here because of blood, sweat, and tears. We don't get here because we get paid a certain number by a certain company without doing anything. So we know that the value of hard work, the value of experience, the value of wisdom, the value of learning as much as we can. Also, learning from successes and failures, because we never fail. We succeed or we learn, right? We never fail. So never fear of failure. I know all of us, most of you have parents like us who always will defend, protect us from failure. So don't be too worried about failure. Failure is good, right? As long as those failure doesn't kill you and those failure are managed in a way, it is good, because we learn a lot more from failures than we ever will be from successes. So learn as much as we can, and please come back, right? Because you can have nasi lemak and bak kut teh and go to Genting with your CEO, even when you're at 22 years old. So that's the difference.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. Would Mr. Funk or Neil would like to go next?
I'll let Ching finish. I'll just keep it at 30 seconds, right? I think first tip, choose wisely, right? You got to pick somewhere that you can see yourself succeeding in the next 5 to 10 years, right? It doesn't have to be a clear vision. It doesn't have to be 2020, but it's got to be somewhere where you can see yourself grow and succeed, right? It could be a corporate because you like the corporate culture, you like the institutional structures that are in place. It could be an SME because you believe in their growth, you believe that they will make it one day. It could be a small-time company in your hometown because you want to be close to your parents, right? We have different motivations, but choose wisely, right? Second is work hard. This is a trait that I see increasingly less and less of in the young graduates of today. And if you work hard, right, you rise above and beyond 90% of those that are out there. You differentiate yourself, right? You put yourself on that fast track, on that trajectory to achieving greater heights, right? That's so important. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, my turn. It's good to go last. I think I've been always going first every question, so I have a bit more time to ponder. But I think what FT and Neo said earlier, right, about learning and working hard, it really pays. It really pays. I just want to really emphasize that. So that's one. But also make sure, I mean, as part of doing, I call it doing a good job. I'm really just doing a good job, learning and build connections. I built that all on the one because you never know what will happen. What I mean by that is how I got my job at Maxis is actually a funny one, right? I did a good job in the late 2000s on a large project during the financial crisis. I mean, I'm trying to summarize this very quickly, but and then sort of 10 years down the road, someone remembered me and sort of said, oh, you know, as part of I was formerly at KPMG as a consultant, and he's like, well, I remember you did a good job then when you were in Australia. Why don't you come along and advise the CFO, then CFO of Maxis? And it was because he remembered of the good job I did 10 years ago. Got in there, then did a good job at Maxis, and the Maxis CFO goes, hey, I don't know what role I really want you to come into. You seem like a good guy. Can I give you a good job? And that was it. That was, you know, and so, you know, do a good job because people will remember it 10 years down the road. Build connections because, trust me, especially KL and the region, whilst it's growing, it is still a very small circle of people. And if you do, and trust me, you always need that connection to help you. Like everyone will do a good job, and then really building those connections can take you to the next level faster. And then the other one is, I think, invest in your social media profiles. I think that's getting very important in this digital age. Spend time in LinkedIn. I know everyone's very good at their Instagrams and maybe their Facebook posts now, or even TikTok, but I think as you go into grow your own professional career, really come up with your own LinkedIn profile. Think of other professional social media platforms as well, because I know it's a double-edged sword for the employers on sort of my colleagues on this side going like, well, are you looking for a new job? But at the end of the day, to Sanjeev's point, right? If you love your job and you are best at what you do, your current employer or future employers will value you. And one way is to really build that profile in the social media space. But from a professional, you need to have sort of two profiles, to be honest. Yeah. And then the last one is, as you progress in your career, always look for your sponsors and your mentors. And those two are two different groups of people who will help you along your career when you build your career. So sponsors are those who would sponsor your promotion. So your first sponsor will always be a direct boss. But also think about other sponsors who will be in and around the organization. And of course, as you join, and this may not really apply to a fresh graduate, but as you slowly sort of grow up, like, you know, keep in mind who your sponsors are. And mentors are ones who will actually help walk you through your careers and shape your career without necessarily being involved with you on a day-to-day basis, and someone you can sort of pick up the phone, even if you have not spoken to him or her over the last 6 months, and you say, hey, I've got this issue at work, or I'm thinking about growing my career. Can I have a chat, 1 hour coffee chat with you? That person really is someone perhaps more senior, could be your former boss, who you really respect, that you want to sort of bounce ideas and get. So always make sure in your career, I mean, in my career, I always make sure I have, I mean, the older, the more senior you get, you want to have, you know, a bigger group of sponsors, 5, 6, 7. But of course, when you start, you want 1 to 2. And then your mentors, you know, you keep it to 5 to 7 of them as well. As you sort of progress your career, I always find it very useful. So sponsors and mentors are very important.
Thank you, Mr. Funk. Actually, we have one more speaker, Puan Oli, to answer this question.
He hadn't forgotten, Oli.
No worries, Mark. Just a quick one. I believe that we should have the courage and fun element. And I know the young ones that are coming to the work, sometimes you should just be experimental. I guess perhaps I may have left my banking roots far behind, Hong Tuan and Neo, forgive me. You know, they're always looking for, I'm not sure, I would say 5 years, Neo. I've seen people who come 3 years. I believe people should be, the tenure should be a matter of commitment and passion. And I measure that much more. And I would say be brave and make sure that it's, I hate to use the word culture. Sometimes it's overused, right? But check, you know, the new generations always do reviews, right? They want to buy a bottle of kombucha. They read 100 reviews, whether it's the right one. So the same thing, look out, because this is better than Glassdoor. That's the reality, because it's very evolving. So in closing, be courageous, be experimental, and look to somewhere that will allow you to grow as well as have fun. Thank you very much, Jeremy. That would be my tips to those starting out their career. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers who have answered the questions. Now we'll move on to the final part of the webinar, which is the Q&A session from our audience. So there is the first question is actually directed to Mr. Mr. Chen. The question is there an advantage to starting your career overseas for 2 to 3 years to gain a more diverse experience before returning to Malaysia? And I know that you have actually spoken on getting some work experience before, let's say, entering a bigger company. But I think this question is more specific towards working in an overseas environment.
Okay, almost like a trap question, right? So asked by somebody who is currently overseas, should I work 2 to 3 years overseas before coming back? So if I said yes, then he said, yeah, so I would. Then what's the point of having this webinar in the first place? If I say no, then say, but it's so logical. So why can't I work 2 to 3 years? Since I'm in the UK, I got visa anyway. If I'm in Australia, I get to work anyway. So, but I'm going to be candid, you know, as you probably know that I'm candid anyway. So my answer is yes. If you can get a valuable job, don't work as a barista there. Don't work as a ship shearer in Australia. If you can get a proper job, whatever that job is, but it's commensurating with the value that you can bring after you come back. Because if you work as a barista, obviously that is a valuable experience as well. But when you come back and try to join a IB or join a digital, I shouldn't say that there is nothing digital in doing, you know, working in Starbucks, but certainly the experience that you're going to have may not be, you know, easily translatable into something that you can then put on the CV and say that, yeah, this is really some content that I've learned. Experience, yes, but perhaps not content. So that's my number one. Number two is any experience would be valuable, but regardless of whether it is in overseas or here, as you know, Ching mentioned, in Malaysia we are superbly diverse as well. Diversity just doesn't exist only in Australia or in the UK or in the US. Diversity actually it exists everywhere. It's just a matter of how you're going to manage and how you're going to be imbued into the diversity in that specific geography that you'll be in. So rather than thinking it is a geography issue, it is an experience issue. So to me, I'm agnostic. regardless. I hire people, Ollie hires people, Sanjeev, all of us hires people. And they said that, if we have 3 years overseas, I do this and this and this, I should get this. The answer is a very flat no. It really depends what you have learned from those experiences and what value can you bring to the table after the 2-3 years, whatever you have. So geography is irrelevant, at least to me. Yeah. So that's my try to be intelligent way to answer both yes and no at the same time, but you get the drift.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chen, for answering that question. Next up, we have another question from another viewer, which is, would it be better off for us to start our career in a large company or a small company? And I know this is an interesting question, considering that all of you speakers come from a rather large corporation.
I'll take that. I think I have a bit of a unique perspective on this because I actually started my career in commercial banking, where I looked after the little guy, right? And I also have a family business, and it's a large family, right? With a couple of business lines, and I can say that there are advantages to starting out at the corporate, in a large corporate, right? And the reason is because a lot of the institutional stuff is already there, right? Things like training, development, right? Things like exposure, all the rotations that you can have. All these are available, yes, but to a much lesser extent in a smaller company. So I would say, yeah, sure, start in a large company, appreciate what a large company can do, and then if you like, right, go for a smaller company, bringing that experience with you.
Thank you, Mr. Neo. Does any one of the other speakers would like to answer this question?
Yeah, I'll do very quickly. I started with a big company. I still am with a big company, but along the way, I don't know whether you consider 1,400 people a small company. But it is an entrepreneur that started from very small. I work with 2 entrepreneurs. Both of them have similar or exactly the same surname called Tan. Tan Sri lah, yeah? Tan Sri is Tan lah. Tan Sri A and Tan Sri B, they both have the same surname called Tan anyway. I think big or small, the main difference is this. When you are in a big company, most of the job and tasks and responsibilities are very segregated, are very vertical, are very specific. So you get deep dived into very specific things. But when you are in a smaller company, in Chinese, you call it one leg kick, which means you have one leg, you kick everywhere. You need to do everything. So you learn marketing, you learn sales, you learn HR, you learn finance, you have to learn everything. So if you guys are into those, learning as fast as possible, as much as possible, but not as deep, in terms of structure and governance may not be as strong, smaller company would be good. If you go in and say multinationals and big, large corporates, obviously you cannot do everything because obviously everything has a specific system and structure. Then learning those, and as you go through your career, you learn different, and learn to navigate those geography within the organizations is a skill as well. So a combination of both would be good. I have no specific recommendation whether to start big or small. It depends on your appetite. It depends on what you want as well. Because I think people are successful both ways. You start from big or start from small, and you transit over and along your career, in, out from big and small. It all depends.
It's all about the learning experience, actually. If you think you stop learning, then the natural thing is to start big because they have all the infrastructure, the structure is all in place, and all is a safer place to learn. But in reality, it's sort of you have to judge yourself whether you feel like you're learning enough. Especially when I mentioned sort of 20s, 30s. In your 20s, if you feel like, okay, I'm just sort of going in and out, not learning anything, then it's time for you to go. And whether that's small or big, there are pros and cons, I think, that has already been mentioned. So the moment you feel like you stop learning, that's when you sort of got to look around, big or small.
Thank you for answering that question. We'll move on to, I think, our last question from the audience because I think we're running out of time. And the final question is, what is the difference in terms of the work-life balance in Malaysia compared to other developed countries? And do companies in Malaysia emphasize this work-life balance for the employees? And I'd like to direct this question to Mr. Sanjeev, Madam Oli, and Mr. Fang to answer.
Yeah, so let me start first, right? From my personal experience. Work-life concept is widely adopted, right, in corporates right now, because I'm pretty sure all the panelists here, they are firms. They are talking about work-life balance because employees want work-life balance, right? So where we are right now, I think we are traveling a little bit far there. There are industry champions in Malaysia who are pioneering certain things, right? For example, I work from home, right? But I do have the flexibility to go to the office if I want to. So the power comes back to the employee to decide what's best for them and the purpose of what you are doing. That suits the location, right? So that's always a big aspect of work-life balance, where you can choose what you want to do, right? Because you are going to be going through different stages in your life, right? Where you may probably need to concentrate on certain other things, right? You may have a kid and you may want to take some time off. All that, right? Big companies are kind of taking that lead, even though some of the legal provisions, right, in Malaysia, they are still catching up, right? Because we are having some good improvements coming up next year about parental leave and etc. So it's always benchmarking, right? And going with what is the best practice out there and what our people want, because we always talk about people are our best assets. And we are going to give it to them what works for them, right? And there may be a time lag because of the cultural elements or where we are as the economy, right? It's when you are going towards growth to maturity, it takes a while to get there, right? To put the infrastructure in place and then give that work-life balance and the choice. I would kind of take that work-life balance word away and say the choice with the employees, right? How they want to do work and what is the best way of bringing their best selves to work. And you tell me, I will help you throughout the journey, right? That's the employer take right now, I would say. So it's pretty much going well in Malaysia scene right now, I would say, with the help of some of the pioneering companies.
Thank you, Mr. Sanjeev.
Sanjeev is very eloquent and elegant in his answer. I think the reality is, having worked in the previous, in Singapore, in London, and then the Middle East, I do find that the demands in the Asian markets much higher. So therefore, what to you is balance today, right? Is it 50-50? And when does the 50-50? On a daily basis, or is it on an aggregate weekly basis? I do agree, Sanjeev, the organizations are making an effort, but I do think that we also, predominantly the Asians, our work culture is like, oh my God, we're 24/7, that WhatsApp has just pinged me, I need to answer now. So even if the organization gives you that flexibility, there's a little bit of that. But increasingly, as the generations go into the millennial and Zenders, do not disturb me while I'm doing my fly cycle, I need my life. Don't send me emails past 6 p.m. So I think what I feel is, because Malaysia is host to several regional hubs company, I find that some of my colleagues are saying, hey, in my job, because I cover Hungary and all these things, I'm able to adopt or experience a different kind of a work-life balance. whereas some of my colleagues who are in a much more traditional environment, 5 days, come to office, even though I want it, Sanjeev, they're not giving it. I think it's a progression in the country, but I applaud the flexible working sort of legislation because it forces people to think about it. Our demographics are going to be compelling it. But every time I say, okay, I want to come back less days or something like that, one of the bosses, and coaching the bosses is another thing. Hey, look, this boss has said everybody come back, otherwise go find another job, right? So I think that, again, I hate to say this, but I think we're still in an evolution. I do think that the demands in the Asian market in terms of work hours is quite high. And unless you're working with multinationals who's doing a consistent sort of application, we're a little bit, we could accelerate it to help our employees. So I think this is the reality that people should be ready to come back. You come back to Malaysia because you may want to have your work-life balance, but somebody else has the proximity, he's in there or she's in there 5 by 5. I don't buy that killer work culture, don't get me wrong. I buy that organizations should be striving to allow people to live a much fuller life and not just killing ourselves for work. I think out of all of you, I'm the baby boomer here that likes to work forever, and that's completely wrong. I think we should have a better quality of life overall. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. It's the classic online mistake. So I have a slightly different take than Oli. Perhaps it's different perspectives, but I did spend a significant amount of time actually in Australia, working in Australia and working in the UK. But I will observe that times have changed. If this question was asked about 10 years ago, I think that the delta is a lot. But having worked, I did, again, it depends on, actually, I also must say it depends on the type of work. Because if you're going to compare apples to apples, I was doing a lot of, I did do investment banking actually in Australia, and then I was a consultant in sort of the UK, Australia and Malaysia. The hours are the hours. So if you're comparing, in Australia, I work 9 to 5, and here I'm working very late. It's sort of, what jobs are you comparing, right? Because a lot of, in Australia, I was very fortunate to have had to FT's point about, having a sort of a consultant career from the off. But I know a lot of friends there who just end up doing a lot of accounts payable, bookkeeping, and of course, if you did bookkeeping in Malaysia or in the UK, the hours are actually broadly the same. Yes, there is slightly relatively a bit more expectation of the proximity to Oli's point, but I actually don't see that big of a difference because maybe it's generational, but I also think that it's just the demands of the job. And if you're actually going to compare the job that you choose, an investment banker in the UK or Malaysia or Australia, it's actually broadly the same. So I think it's actually up to you how much you and the Asian in you probably always end up wanting to work harder. And what you realize is when I was in Australia or in the UK, I probably just appear to be working a lot harder, but to me it's just it's more of a culture thing. But if I were to compare, it's not much of a big difference, to be honest.
Okay. Right. Once again, thank you, Madam Oli, Mr. Neo, Mr. Sanjeev, Mr. Fang, and Mr. Chen for answering all of those questions and for the great discussion. It was a pleasure to have all of you with us. And so this concludes our webinar. And thank you all for attending, and we hope that you have learned something new and enjoyed this webinar.